Governors meetings march on in the NFL. We're going to focus our attention to Seattle. The Seahawks moved on from Russell Wilson and Bobby Wagner, clearly in a period of transition, so you got to wonder about the future of DK Metcalf. Metcalf has said he wants to remain in Seattle. He's spoken recently about taking on a leadership role for the team. And over the past 2 weeks, though, there have been 2 blockbuster trades involving elite wide receivers, so you got to wonder if the former second-round pick in Metcalf is next. At the Breakers, we are now joined by Canfora and Josina Anderson. Guys, you look beautiful out there. We got so many questions, though, surrounding the future of DK Metcalf in Seattle. Josina, you were just on the press conference with Pete Carroll. Any Metcalf talk there?
Yeah, so Pete Carroll was talking about a number of things, including their wide receiver, JLC, and DK Metcalf. And he basically said that he can't imagine any scenario where he doesn't have DK Metcalf, how instrumental he is to the, obviously, to the offense. This is a guy who's a second-round pick in 2019, entering his 4th season, slated to make $3.9 million in base salary this year. But obviously, someone who they need to really tick off that offense when they're really still trying to figure out the quarterback position.
Yeah, I mean, look, the last time we heard from Pete Carroll, I think, was at the Combine, and he said they had no intentions to trade Russell Wilson. The Russell Wilson trade, little did we know, was already cooking behind the scenes. Yeah. So I think, look, we know that John Schneider's a wheeler dealer, so they'll always listen to anything. But whoever that quarterback is not going to be Russ. You're going to want to have a couple of targets for him, and Lockett, the downfield guy, and DK Metcalf, who could beat you in a lot of different ways. I'm not sure he gets paid there long term. There's the franchise tag the year after as well, though. So people are saying, well, they got to do something now. They don't have to. It'll be interesting. Wide receivers are being traded now in a way we hadn't seen before. And if you don't want to pay them, you know, what do you get for them? I would say this is something we'll hear a lot about around the draft. If you made me guess, I think he's probably back there because I'm not sure that the haul for him is going to be like what we've seen for Tyreek Hill, like we saw for Devontae Adams.
And I think also it's about keeping Seattle attractive, you know, for passers to want to come there with the offensive weapons to throw to. And DK is still finding himself in terms of, you know, just evolving in offense maturity. Obviously, his numbers dipped down from 1,300 to 967 last year. Part of that is Russell Wilson getting hurt. You know, part of that, too, is just figuring himself out, you know, right? But I think Pete Carroll and some of the veterans even on that team have said they're not in a rebuilding phase. And to keep selling that, you want to keep, you know, DK on there. But I do agree with you that he is not necessarily going to be commanding what you're seeing out there with the Tyreek Hills and the Devontae Adams, for sure.
Yeah, he recently appeared on Showtime's KG Certified, hosted by Kevin Garnett, and he told Garnett, it's time for me to step up and be a leader. It's my time in Seattle now. So he's definitely going along with it for now. But you guys mentioned the quarterback situation there, and that's something we really need to look into. They currently have Drew Lock, who came over to Seattle in that Russell Wilson trade, as well as Jacob Eason. And the reunited situation with Geno Smith, who was the backup for Wilson for the last few years. What's happening with the quarterback situation there? Who is going to be their starting quarterback? Josina, we'll start with you.
Well, it's very interesting because they brought over Drew Lock, JLC, and then they had these press conferences really trying to sell you on the fact that they're confident in Drew Lock.
Yeah.
Right? And, I mean, listen, Drew Lock is a budding prospect in the league, but he is not where other people are as far as a known quantity as a passer. And then when everything was bubbling with Cleveland, you were hearing as far as through sources that they were talking to Cleveland through back channels to try to figure out what the compensation would be for someone like Baker Mayfield. I was hearing that they were told as a second-round pick. Maybe it's a third that could turn around to a second. But this was before Baker Mayfield wrote that Oprah letter, you know, to everyone, telling everybody how he feels. And now that the musical chairs has ended, you know, for, you know, whatever, and now that aren't as many seats, of course that's going to have an impact when everybody knows that you have to get rid of him. Now, what you started to hear a little bit that even before arriving here is that Seattle had potentially cooled on Baker, what have you, especially as he was making it known that he wanted to go to Indy. Indy has since said that they'd rather have Matt Ryan.
Done deal.
Baker Mayfield, and now there aren't so many chairs. Now, Pete Carroll just addressed the press maybe about an hour ago, and specifically asked them about his interest level in still acquiring a veteran starting quarterback, and he basically told us, yes, they're in the business as a tarantula or with buzzing, whatever, just went over my head. Right. I'm still here. It's not arachnophobia. I don't know what's going on. But he still mentioned the fact that they're looking for a veteran starting quarterback, that they're in the business for a starting quarterback. And then I tried to ask him, what traits are you looking for? Does it rhyme with Schmaker Mayfield?
Yeah,
you know,
I think it might.
Nimi Napolo, you know, and he basically kind of gave me a coy smile. So they're
what
still
about
looking.
Florida and Fluff? Because I go back to the Green Bay roots, right? John Schneider, he came up under Ted Thompson, as did Brian Gutekunst and everybody who's there now. And they thought enough of Jordan Love to move up and get him a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Jordan Love needs to play some football. Another year behind Aaron Rodgers does him no good. I wonder if his fallback plan in Seattle for John Schneider is Jordan Love. And I think Baker Mayfield now, yeah, I think there's interest, but I don't think they want to pay that full $19 million. Jimmy Haslam, you're paying all this money on payroll. You're $40 million over the cap. You're paying Deshaun Watson all that money. Why don't you eat $5 million of Baker Mayfield salary, and then we'll talk turkey. So that's another one around the draft I think could be interesting.
And you're absolutely right, because typically when the Seahawks do these type of transactions, they're always trying to get the other team to take on as much of that salary as possible and see, you know, what type of deal. And Andrew Berry is going to sit back knowing that he has someone in the first round as a passer and trying to get as much compensation as he can for them. But, you know, I think that they need to try to make it work with Baker. I feel like that's the best option, particularly when and I know we're going to talk about Jimmy Garoppolo, but if you're trying to develop that offense with those weapons that you have in Seattle, Jimmy is still trying to heal the right shoulder. He's not passing anytime soon in a substantive way until at least training camp.
Yeah.
That totally leads me to the next question, and that is about Jimmy Garoppolo. And John Lynch came out, their GM, and he said, you know, there were some deals that we were discussing, but then the shoulder surgery came up, and that derailed some of those deals. So Josina, what's the latest with San Fran and their quarterback situation there with Jimmy G?
Well, it's interesting because, you know, general manager John Lynch has been talking about Jimmy Garoppolo in very plain terms, said they're not looking to release him. So he's either going to be with the 49ers or they're still going to be trying to find a trade partner. Now, obviously, this year he counts about $26.95 million against the cap. If they're able to trade him, they save about $25 million. And releasing him, which they're not going to do, but if that were to happen, they'd be on the hook for $7.5 million, but they can make that up in offsets. It's not really what they're looking to do. And quite frankly, JLC, I don't think they should do it. You know, Les needs to put it out here, you know, value the veterans and get it done. Trey Lance is not there yet, period.
No, he's not. And if it's not Jimmy Garoppolo, it's going to be somebody else. And that's another landing spot, I think, for Baker Mayfield potentially, if the timing's right. Because him and that Kyle Shanahan offense, the boots, the rollouts, I think they could compensate for the lack of size and some of the things that's naturally baked into their offense. But regardless, I don't think it can be Trey Lance and another kid or another developmental guy or Sudfeld or whatever. But in the meantime, there's no trade to be made. He can't even start a light throwing program until July. There's no guarantees he's ready for week one. I'm not sure someone's going to take on that money and just assume we'll be good to go with Jimmy G. We can knock these kids in this draft class all we want. That's what people do this time of year. 4 are probably going in the first round, and some of those teams might be more inclined to go with their developmental guy than look at a Jimmy Garoppolo. So I don't think he's on their roster this year, but I think this is something that gets resolved in the summer, in large part because of his health. He
should be on their roster. I mean, have the arms race that has been going on in the offseason with the impact of what Les Snead and the Rams did and all these NBA-type moves going on across the NFL. If you're trying to stay competitive, the best thing to do is keep Jimmy G there. And even John Lynch said, you know, that they can't afford it. So if you can't afford it, then just do it. That's the best thing to be competitive. So to me, it shouldn't even be a conversation. The people who are going to have the most confidence in Jimmy G's arm are the 49ers.
Absolutely. Now, we had some really big news. No, I love it. I love it. We had some big news yesterday in the NFL. All NFL teams now required to employ either a woman or person of color to serve as an offensive assistant starting this fall. So, Josina, what are your thoughts on the Rooney Rule expansion that just went down?
Well, it's very interesting. You know, I always say these things are well-intentioned. I understand the root of what they're trying to do. I think that it helps the league stay as transparent as possible, you know, with the hiring cycle, because you always have to consider what would be the case if it were not there. It's just like these teams that have quarterbacks are talking about getting another one. Well, you got to tell me what your option is if you're trying to displace something. So right now I don't hear anything better than what they're currently doing. And even though it's not perfect, I understand what they're trying to achieve. Now, we can all have our feelings about the fact that they're now requiring the hiring of another minority offensive assistant for the simple point of trying to flood the pipelines with more offensive talent because we're lacking the presence of, coaches that are people of color more so on the offensive side. But how do you feel about this?
Well, look, I think obviously the league has been under fire for quite some time about indisputable facts in terms of the lack of representation of people of color in decision-making roles in the NFL, general manager, team president, head coach. But I just keep waiting for a diversity of ownership. And when the ranks of those who actually pay everybody's salary start to look more like society at large, then I think we'll see greater representation trickling down. The idea of it trickling up through internships, through more people getting their start, right? But then they reach a certain level and all of a sudden that pipeline closes off. That's just the unfortunate reality. So I'm very eager to see what happens with this Denver Broncos scenario and if there's real diversity in terms of representation of that ownership group. There's everybody says all the right things, but it's got to be action.
Well, I would say this, and I think that you'd be comfortable with me, talking about this because I can tell that this is a topic that is very, the commissioner is passionate about this topic. I did have an opportunity to speak with him about it yesterday for, I would say, about 20 or 30 minutes. One of the things that I wanted to get across was that I feel like you have to break this comfort barrier as far as the owners being at the gate. They are the gatekeepers, ultimately. And if they're the ones still not feeling comfortable with hiring people of color in terms of having higher numbers of that, because we only have 2 right now, because those are the positions that are closer to the power structure. Part of doing that is eroding the comfort barrier. And how do you do that? Maybe there needs to be more retreats, direct one-on-one with the owners, having these conversations with these coaches, and not just, having tacos, having meaningful conversations about your upbringing, how you came up, and all these other things to try to, I guess, engender that familiarity and hopefully to break that down. And then lastly, you mentioned the ownership piece, and because you're not going to have a lot of turnover when there's only one team for sale as far as having more representation at the ownership level. So I would like to see, and maybe this is a pipe dream, some of these current ownership groups giving up some equity to create more seats at the table, give up 5 and 7% here so we can more immediately have more people of color at the current tables instead of waiting for the the 49ers or the Panthers to be for sale whenever God knows when. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, that would be putting their money where their mouth is. It may be easier just to hire people who don't necessarily have to look like you, but we'll see what happens here with the next hiring cycle, and again with the sale of the Broncos, I think will be completed before the season. So we'll at least know if there's more representation in the ownership group sooner than later.
But he's very receptive to the conversation. Hopefully, looking forward to the commissioner speaking here before he leaves, and definitely also mentioned that this is something that he wants to continue to stay in his position as far as making sure that this topic, this issue, sees even more progress than it already has.
We really appreciate both your insights on that. Now, before I let you go, is there anything else that you've seen or heard at the NFL owners meetings that would be noteworthy for us, JLC? I'll start with you, just real quick. Anything you got for us?
A couple people with teams feel like there may not even be a vote on this overtime stuff here. It could be tabled till the May meetings. We've seen them do that in the past. So we may leave here without any closure on any on-field issues.
But I don't understand why this is so hard to resolve. 2 teams get a chance to score in overtime. They were done. I mean, we did that in two seconds?
Get 24 of them back there to agree to it, and it's done, JoJo. See what you can do.
Why not agree? Just both teams get a chance. Why is this so hard? I don't why are you not in favor of both teams getting a chance? I don't understand that. I don't
Change is difficult for some people.
We're going to table this to May. There's a lot more things that could worthy of time tabling to May than that. I'm just saying.
Josina, I totally agree with you. I don't get it either. But hey, thank you guys so much. This has been wonderful.
Complicated.
I know it doesn't seem like it's that complicated, but hey, we're not the one making the rules right now, guys. You were fantastic. Thanks for joining us here on CBS Sports HQ. We have plenty more coverage from the NFL owners meetings on HQ all day long. But if you need some more NFL action right now, you got to check out our Pick 6 podcast. Our guys getting you up to speed in about 30 minutes each day. The latest pod is a little mock draft action for you. Got to check it out.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.